We began today's show with something that shocked me. And it's not often that breaking news really does that to me anymore. I know I sadly speak for a lot of us when I say that the last 6+ years have kind of numbed my senses when it comes to this kind of stuff. But then I saw this while watching the Rachel Maddow show Thursday night.
Liz, you on the phone?
Yeah, I'm here. Thanks, Kevin. I guess first a question. When we were talking about the 25th Amendment resolution, and you asked if what happens if it gets there after he's gone. Is there any chance? Are you hearing that he might resign? Is there any reason to think that might happen?
I've had some few discussions. My gut tells me no. I'm seriously thinking of having that conversation with him tonight. I haven't talked to him in a couple days. From what I know of him, I mean, you guys all know him too. Do you think he'd ever back away? But what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to call him. This is what I think. No, it'll pass the House. I think there's a chance it'll pass the Senate even when he's gone. And I think there's a lot of different ramifications for that. Now, I haven't had a discussion with the Dems that if he did resign, would it not happen? Now, this is one personal fear I have. I do not want to get into any conversations about Pence party, anything like that. I mean, the only discussion I would have with him is that I think this will pass, and it would be my recommendation we should resign. I mean, that would be my take, but I don't think he would take it, but I don't know.
On that phone call, you hear wannabe Speaker of the House and current Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy talking to Congresswoman Liz Cheney after the violent attack on the United States Capitol on January 6th. As a former prosecutor and trial lawyer, it is something that immediately caught my attention because it's an example of the kind of evidence that I always wanted. The kind of evidence that impeaches the credibility of that witness by catching them in a direct lie. This is about as black and white as it gets. McCarthy's own words caught on audio contradicting his denial that he would advise Trump to resign. The release of that McCarthy tape came from New York Times reporters Alexander Burns and Jonathan Martin to preview their new book, This Will Not Pass, which draws on hundreds of interviews with lawmakers and officials. Before the release of the tape, the New York Times published reporting from the book, noting that McCarthy and Senator Minority Leader Mitch McConnell privately blasted Trump after the attack on the Capitol, but that their fury faded fast. When NBC News reached out to McCarthy, he denied the account, and when asked if he said he pushed President Trump to resign, McCarthy's spokesman replied, quote, "Nope, he did not." But then we heard that tape, showing Kevin McCarthy talking to Liz Cheney about the same thing he censured her for saying that publicly. I mean, this is about as open and shut of a case as you can get. McCarthy's office was caught lying to the press, more importantly, caught lying to the American people. And that we hear these conversations happening just after January 6th makes it all the more shameless. That the very man hoping Trump would get removed from office was also the very first to show up to Mar-a-Lago for this photo op. It also makes you wonder what else Kevin McCarthy was willing to do to compromise in order to stay in power. Joining me now is Matthew Dowd. He was a top advisor to former President George W. Bush. He's the founder of Country Over Party, and he's also an MSNBC political analyst. Matthew, thank you so much for being here. Let's look moving forward, right? McCarthy's credibility, it's shot, in my opinion. How does he have any chance to become Speaker if Republicans take the House in the midterms, or does he not?
Well, it's surprising that he was caught, and these words to me was surprising he was caught. It's not surprising to me about Kevin McCarthy. He's done this. We just haven't had a clear example. He's done this for years, where he says one thing and does another in the course of that. Integrity is not something that's ever been a pillar of Kevin McCarthy or most of the GOP these days. I think the question, Katie, becomes is will they be held accountable? Because so far, they have not been held accountable for all of these lies and all of these things that they've done. They have not yet, as of yet, been fundamentally held accountable, people in leadership held accountable. I think Kevin McCarthy's biggest problem is not among the majority of the American public who despises this type of behavior that he exhibits, but among the Republican caucus, because I think what they think, the majority of the caucus, wants people that will loyally back Donald Trump privately and publicly. And so I think that's where his difficulty is. I think it's going to be almost impossible for him if the Republicans take the House back, which is, I still think, questionable at this point. I know there's a lot of people say the Republicans are going to do it. I think there's a lot of time, and two, I don't think the polls show as of yet to me that the Democrats are going to lose the House. As of right now, it'll be close. But I don't think he's going to get the support of his own caucus because they're so embedded with Donald Trump and so embedded with the base of the Republican Party, who would just as soon believe any lies that are told. I don't think he can get the votes he needs to become speaker. I think they'll go to somebody more they think is much more of a complete, utter loyalist to Donald Trump.
Yeah, but Matt, to use your own words, accountability, what does accountability for somebody like Kevin McCarthy look like, in your opinion?
Well, what I'd like the American public to do is to look at it and say, here's a guy who's a leader of the Republican Party, one of the national leaders of the Republican Party. Why would we put those people in power in November? And so I think that's, whether it's independents or Democrats, is accountability to me is ultimately, I don't have a lot of faith in right now, as I'm sure you do, in the wheels of justice or unfolding in a manner that holds them accountable in some courtroom or someplace else that sort of the legal system can do. I think it's up to us as voters. And so the only way we can hold Kevin McCarthy accountable is, one, doing what you're doing and what Rachel did, and what I think more people will do is highlight the lack of integrity on his part and the Republicans' part in this. But it is convincing the American public is, do you want these people to hold all the levers of power in November?
Well, Matt, we just had some new reporting that just came out. I'm going to play more audio of McCarthy, this time on a House Republican conference call, and this took place 5 days after the attack on the Capitol. Listen to this.
But let me be very clear to all of you, and I've been very clear to the president. He bears responsibilities for his words and actions. No ifs, ands, or buts. I asked him personally today, does he hold responsibility for what happened? Does he feel bad about what happened? He told me he does have some responsibility for what happened. And he needs to acknowledge that.
Matt, this is pretty new, right? I mean, what's your reaction to McCarthy saying that Trump told him that Trump does acknowledge that he bears responsibility for what happened on January 6th?
Well, Katie, this is the only part that gives me some positive feeling that maybe whatever the Justice Department's doing and whatever the independent commission is, or the commission is, that bipartisan commission is in Congress that's investigating this, could lead to more than just the people that were at the Capitol, that broke into the Capitol and that directly caused the insurrection, that the people that enabled it and facilitated it, that we could trace it back to them. That part of it, we begin to start seeing a pattern, both from the president. They knew what they were doing, and they knew what it could cause, and what it could cause was an insurrection at the Capitol. And so as this evidence begins to appear more, and my guess is that bipartisan commission that's going on has even more of this. And so I'm heartened by the fact that we're beginning to gather more and more evidence to sort of hold the higher ups responsible for what happened at the Capitol.
Perennial Florida man Matt Gaetz provided a preview of how the MAGA wing of the GOP is going to react to this news, tweeting, "While I was rallying in Wyoming against Liz Cheney, Kevin McCarthy was defending Liz Cheney among House Republicans, while Liz Cheney was secretly recording Kevin McCarthy for the New York Times. GOP leader, you should have trusted my instincts, not your own." Matt, does the MAGA world need an exorcism at this point to be able to purge themselves of the Trump demon? What is it going to take for them to be able to see the light?
Well, I think there's a segment of the population that no matter what we show them, or no matter what the facts that we lay out, is not going to change their minds. They've bought into all of this. They consume information in a manner that could completely uplifts their conspiracy theories and misinformation and disinformation. So I think there's about 30% of the country or 33% of the country that there's no changing. But that leaves 67% or 70% of the country that we don't have to change their mind or don't have to move from a mythic world to reality. But I think that the majority of the Republican Party actually goes along with what Matt Gaetz just tweeted out. They would just as soon throw Kevin McCarthy overboard and stick with somebody like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who's in trial right now, whether or not she can appear on the ballot. I was struck by a poll I saw last month, which showed Marjorie Taylor Greene is fundamentally more liked in the among Republican voters than Liz Cheney. And that tells you where the Republican Party is today.
Well, then maybe that means, like you've always said, country over party. And maybe that means that we need to have more of a push. But I agree, accountability has to start somewhere. And the first place it's going to have to be is in the ballot box. Matthew Dowd, as always, thank you for your insight and your time.
Great to be here, Katie, and congrats on your show.